When you hear the word marketing, what do you think of? If it's just social media posts to get people into your door, maybe we should reconsider that. And we've got a pretty great guest on the podcast today that's going to help us out in the area of Christian school marketing. The Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. But bear in mind, the views and opinions expressed here are those of the hosts and not necessarily of the Herzog Foundation. Don't let limited budgets or IT staffing make your staff vulnerable to common cybersecurity attacks like phishing and social engineering. One of our past guests and friend of the pod, James, has offered 3 listeners' Christian schools 3 free virtual training sessions. These 45-minute video conferences will personally cover critical topics like email security, password best practices, and online safety and privacy. Email us at mark@christianprinciplespodcast.com and tell us why your school should be a part of these free sessions.
We're pumped today to have Mr. Jim McKenzie join us. Jim, thanks for being here with us, and we are excited to talk to you about the marketing work, the marketing help that you offer to Christian schools, and I'm sure help besides just that in personal life and what you do there with Herzog. So let's get into that.
Yeah.
Jim, what is your story with Christian education?
First of all, thanks, Mark, Matt, for having me on. It's great. Love to talk to other Christian school leaders. I've got 30 years of experience in education, 27 of those years in Christian education.
Awesome.
I spent the large part of that as a Christian school leader, 21 years, all at the same school, a pre-K through 12th grade Christian school in Gainesville, Florida. And like most Christian school leaders, I came up through the education ranks. As a teacher, my background is in education. That's what I love. But then all of a sudden, I find myself leading a Christian school, and one that's really struggling with its enrollment. So much so that the church that we're a part of is having to really, really subsidize the operational expenses of the school. And it's getting to a point where they're like, hey, this isn't sustainable. And there's conversations about whether the school should even remain open. And I remember at that point saying, well, hold on a second. Maybe let me see if I can figure out this marketing thing. Like it's like we haven't really tried, right? Like it kind of at this point, we've kind of had this like spray and pray mentality. Like we just kind of like spend a lot of money on advertising stuff and then hope that something works, right?
Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. No
Yeah,
idea
right.
what that kind
No,
of.
nobody does
What
that,
do you
right?
mean? Spray and pray.
And so and this is
Even
back
that would be. Yeah, that might be even a strategy would be a strategy at the very least. So,
and I can remember this was 20 years ago. So this is back when like we were still doing like the yellow pages and like the newspaper, and like all these very kind of expensive advertising and really hard to track, right? So you're like, I don't know if this is working or not, but we're spending a ton of money and we're not growing. And so I just remember saying to the school, let me see if I can figure out this marketing stuff. And so I really began to like look at like marketing practices and marketing strategies and figure out like what would work for the unique niche of a Christian school. And we began to put some of those things in place. And as we did, the school started to grow. And I remember even we ended one year at 140. We did some things that summer. We started the next year at 170. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, hey, we've got some momentum, and that sort of bought us some more time. And then the next year, we were 200. And I remember the year that we surpassed the 200 student threshold, like our faculty, like they threw a party. They brought in a cake during pre-planning because it's like 200 students seemed like this magical ceiling that we would never get past.
wow.
Right? Well, fast forward 15 years, we're a school of 615. We have built multiple buildings. There are 250 families on the wait list at any one time. The rumor is now, like, when you get pregnant, before you call your parents, call the Rock School. And
Call the Rock School.
right? And so it's just this incredible journey that we've been on. And so, as course, as word got out, people began asking, hey, like, what'd you do? What'd you do? What'd you do? And so, we began for the last, 10 years or so, I've been sharing my story and sharing like the strategies, and we're sort of refining those things over time. And what we've seen is like, I didn't just get lucky. It wasn't just my context. Like God didn't just bless our school. I didn't catch lightning in a bottle. Like I've seen schools that have followed the same framework and the same strategies that I did at my school that we've taught others. have equal success or greater success even. And so I really know that it works. And people often meet me or they'll hear me speak at like a Herzog training. They'll be like, "Man, you must really love marketing. You're really passionate about marketing." I'm like, "No, I'm not. Like, I don't love marketing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm an educator. I love Christian education. Like, I love my Christian school." And
Mm.
so I learned what I needed to learn about marketing because it was what was necessary for my Christian school to thrive.
Hmm.
We were never going to fulfill our big mission and vision until we figured out how to do marketing so that we could get the students and the families into our school to be impacted by that vision and mission. And so,
Wow.
it's not,
That's
I don't
exciting.
have a background in like, I'm not a CEO. I don't have a business degree. I don't have an MBA, right? I'm just an educator that figured out some things about marketing
Mm.
and have been happy to share that with other Christian schools.
What a blessing. And we're talking to
Praise the
someone
Lord.
who
Yeah.
knows where we are. I feel this is a little bit irreverent because I feel like we say this about somebody else who knows where we are and knows the things we walk through. But we're talking to somebody today who knows where we are, who knows what we've walked through, and even some of the things you said so far made me so excited because terminology, we're not talking to someone who only speaks in the terminology of the Fortune 500. I've been in the position where I didn't have a marketing budget, where the marketing budget didn't exist. There was no, there was a budget and there was line items, and there was no line item that said anything about marketing or anything about development in that way. So I'm excited to hear from you, and ultimately, I'm excited to get to one of those trainings. I really, really am.
Great.
Matt, are you? I mean,
That's just it. Every time we bring up Herzog, it's like, why are we not like just listening to them all day, every day?
all the time, all the
Like,
time.
come on, this is awesome, and I love that. And I know that there are so many schools like ours that have faced those situations of, you know what, it's not working. We need to close down. When just, a little bit or a lot of effort, really can go a long way. And that's not to say that we don't have faith and that we don't trust God to provide. It's being a steward of the things that we have. So I'm really excited about this conversation for sure.
Usually we have a blip that comes up about the Herzog Foundation, making sure we were signing up for the trainings and things like that. That's not going to happen today because this whole thing, just like our conversation with Dr. David Warren, the whole thing is going to be about one of the Herzog trainings that we have available to us all across the country to sign up for, the specific part of the Leadership Series, which is what we would hear from Mr. McKenzie here about marketing. So let's get right to it. One of the questions we want to make sure we ask you, Jim, what do you think are 3 things that Christian schools are currently doing wrong? I want to take one off the table right now. Doing nothing.
Yeah.
We all know that doing nothing
Sure.
isn't going to work well. So let's just go ahead and say what Mark was doing was not right.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. There's probably a long list, but
Sure.
I'll give you a couple.
Yeah.
I think the first one is that we don't prioritize word of mouth marketing. Right. I think most Christian schools, when you ask them, how do people, like what's growing your school? They say, oh, word of mouth. But then when I say, well, what are you doing to proactively fuel word of mouth within your school? They're like,
Incentivize that.
well, nothing really. So we recognize its importance, right? Like, so we know for a fact that the number one way you grow a Christian school is word of mouth marketing, right? Number 2 would be digital marketing, and then everything else would be a distant third. And so really, if you can do number 1 and number 2 well, you really don't have to do much else. And so, again, sort of going back to my story, we're this small school of 140. We're like, we got to do something. Well, the first thing that we latched onto is like, what can we do in terms of word of mouth marketing? How can we really prime that pump within our school? And we did a couple of activities over the summer, and that's really what generated those 30 new students that helped us get from 140 to 170. And when we talk about, like, people say, well, like, what do you mean? Like, word of mouth is just word of mouth. How do you fuel it? Well, word of mouth is driven by what we would call a promoter. A promoter are the people that love your school, right? They're your raving fans, or the people who are like, this place is amazing, right? Statistically, they're the people who on a survey where you say, hey, how likely are you to tell other people about our school? They would score you a 9 or a 10. That's what's defined as a promoter. Well, promoters are very vocal and they love to tell other people about your school. So what are you doing to cultivate that relationship with your promoters? I often put this in the changed context for a minute. If we were talking about donors, right? We all know that if you go to development training, right, you can learn how to cultivate relationships with donors so that they will write you a check to help you, fulfill your vision. Well, in many ways, a promoter is very much like a donor, but rather than writing you a check from their account, they send you their friends and their family and their colleagues who write you a check for tuition. And I would argue that in many cases, a school probably would generate more revenue by investing in their promoters, especially if they don't
Sure.
have a really robust donor development program.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like sort of the same thing. And with donors, we teach, you're taught generally with a donor, like you thank them, you ask, and you report. You thank, you ask, report. It's kind of this cycle you go through. Well, we can do the same thing with promoters. We can identify them, we can train them, we can remind them, and then we can thank them. And if we will cultivate those promoters the way we often think about cultivating our donors, we can really prime the pump of word of mouth marketing. And if you're a head of school like me, when I started this, it was me. I didn't have an admissions director, a marketing director.
Sure.
I didn't have any of those ancillary, but it was me. So the beautiful thing about a promoter reception for me, or working with promoters, was it's a sales force beyond me. Like the burden wasn't like, I got to go find 70 new students. I have to go find 70 new students. No, I'm going to mobilize a team of really enthusiastic parents to help me go find the 70 new families that I need, right? And so I think that's one of the first mistakes is like we don't prioritize word of mouth. We get hung up on like, well, we need a social media campaign. We need to hire someone to do social media, or like we need to tweak our website. And there's a place for those things, but they don't move the needle on enrollment the way word of mouth can.
Sure. Well, I'm already believing what you're saying because everything you're saying is something that I feel like I'm too intimate with. Matt, is that how you're feeling right now?
Absolutely.
Don't give away
I mean, I think the nail hit right on the head is we all agree word of mouth is the best way, but I think we lean on it too heavily as, well, it just happens naturally. And we aren't priming the pump. We're not looking for opportunities to encourage it until perhaps it's a little too late, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so in our Herzog training, like we teach this cycle of how do you cultivate relationships with promoters, and then we actually model for guests like an activity that you can do with your promoters back at your school. So you get to experience what it's like to be a promoter and how we would treat you, so that you can then go back and replicate that in your own school context.
One of my thoughts is when you say promoter, and I'm imagining that's something that as you were creating this at 140 to before you're going to 170, and you were identifying this in the McKenzie way, the McKenzie path forward, whatever you called it. I imagine maybe you offered some kind of incentivizing for those families. I feel like I do see the incentivization of families, of those promoters too. If you bring in, we'll knock off money off your tuition or something like that. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about? You're talking about something that's more in depth than that? We're going to have to wait to the training to find out? What do you?
No.
No.
Thanks for bringing this up, because this is always a question that comes up, and it's a really important one that needs to be answered, because people ask like, what should we incentivize promoters? And the answer actually is an absolute no.
No.
So actually the research is pretty clear that when you incentivize promoters, you actually de-incentivize them. Like promoters naturally promote because they are enthusiastic about your school. And when you tie financial incentives to it, you actually remove that sort of intrinsic joy that they derive from sharing about your school. And they're going to do it no matter what. They're going to do it because they naturally want to do it. They don't need a reward to do it. So what we say instead is like, don't give away financial discounts and financial. If you're going to do that, take that money and use that to create really meaningful experiences to bring your promoters together. Like throw a party, have a dinner, do these different activities. And then if you have a promoter that's like, man, that's like the fifth family that's come to us from this, then send them a thank you card and drop a gift card in for $100. Hey, enjoy dinner out on us. Thanks for telling people about our school. But do it in a way that you're thanking people or you're celebrating them. You're not tying it to like I have one parent who used to always joke with me like, hey, that's my fifth family. Like, I think I filled my punch card. When do I get a free tuition? Right? Like that's not the model for Christian schools, right? We're not doing punch cards and loyalty cards and, send 9, get the 10th one free, right? Like that's I'd say that's a big no.
Yeah. Also, that's more money out of our pockets, so we can't really do that, right?
Right. It's money you don't need to give away because your promoters don't need it.
They don't need it.
Right? The problem is like usually when you do these incentives, they're school wide. Well, your promoters don't need it. And do you really want to incentivize your disgruntled families to go find more people like them?
Right.
Probably not, right?
No, not at all.
You want to
Hey, what?
mobilize your best. You want to mobilize your best families to go find more families like that to join your school.
What else do you think is something that, as you've reviewed these schools and you speak with them, what's something else? Maybe one more thing that you think that they're, I hate to say doing wrong because maybe everything's a little bit effective, but what's something else that maybe is not working as well as it could or should, or they're not considering?
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is the way that we message to prospective families. Largely, when I look at Christian school websites, what I see are answers to questions. I see a lot of information.
Okay.
And then when families come in and meet, they get a tour and they get more information about your school. And maybe they sit down with a principal or a head of school and they get the elevator pitch and they get more information. But this is what I know. There's two. Generally, we can characterize all prospective families as one of two types. It's either the family that says, you know what, I'm committed to a Christian education and I'm looking for the best Christian school for my child.
Sure.
And they're the ones that usually come to you in kindergarten or maybe after a season of homeschooling. And then everybody else I would characterize
This
this
guy
way.
does know his stuff. This guy knows his stuff pretty dang well right now.
The other category I would say is essentially this. I'm dissatisfied with my child's current educational setting and I'm looking for something different. And when I share that with Christian school leaders and I ask, like, what's the growing opportunity within your community, almost without exception, people are like, it's group B, right? The dissatisfied parent is the one that makes the phone ring. It's the ones that are giving us the website, queries. Like, those are the people we seem to hear from more often. And it's not that they're not Christian families, but they didn't choose our school first, right? They chose some other pathway first, and now there's this level of dissatisfaction. So if we understand that largely most of the families that are coming to us have a dissatisfaction, then what we have to understand is they're not looking for answers to questions. They're looking for solutions to problems. And that's what's missing in most of the messaging from Christian schools. We don't show how we solve problems. We answer questions that parents largely aren't asking.
Wow.
We tell them about our curriculum. We tell them about our teacher-student ratio. We tell them about our athletic accomplishments. We tell them about our uniform policy. We tell them about, all these different things. And yet the whole time that parent's sitting there wondering, yes, but is my greatest problem going to be solved? My kid's being bullied in the school down the street, and we're just really, really frustrated. What I really want to know is my child going to be safe? But all you're giving me are answers to questions that I'm not asking. Right? And so until we can identify what's the problem that needs to be solved and show how we solve it, parents really aren't interested in lots of answers to questions and information. And so how do we identify what are the key questions, what are the key levels, the key areas of dissatisfaction in our local community? And then how do we message in a way that says we can solve this? If we know bullying is a major problem in our community, then how are we, let's identify that and show how we're solving it. If we know that people are frustrated because all their kid does is practice testing for a state exam, and they want more than that, then how do we show that we solve for that, right? So identifying what these things are and how we solve for them. This is straight out of Don Miller's story brand framework, which we teach in our marketing seminar, right? But it's this idea of they're not looking for answers to questions. They're looking for solutions to problems, which is one of the other reasons why open houses and tours are not particularly effective, because in an open house, you can answer questions. In tours, you're largely giving information, right? What we encourage instead is what we did at our school is when a prospective family comes in, they meet one-on-one with the principal or the head of school, and they have an honest conversation where we can figure out why are you here? Why are you thinking about changing schools? Oh, now that we've identified the problem, let me show you how we can solve it. Now that I've shown how we can solve it, let me answer all your other questions that you might have. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a much more impactful way to help lead a prospective family into making a decision. People don't make decisions because you answered all their questions. They make decisions because you've proven that you can solve their greatest problem.
And it's interesting because, when we think we're doing them a great service by sharing all the information that they potentially want to know, but when you first mentioned we stopped, giving all the answers, giving the tours or whatever, you might be tempted to think, oh, now we've got to create a brand new approach. But in reality, you're not changing anything. It's simply just changing the perspective in a way, in that, you are clearly coming here for a reason. You're reaching out to us for a reason. Let's identify that reason. Let's put it out on the table. Let's, be crystal clear, because chances are we already have those solutions. Like, it's not like we're going to have to go out and like, oh, now we got to figure out how to actually make kids read. Like, we already do that. But it's different. And I've seen it, I'm sure you've all seen it, where you share, Mark and I have said this often, where the things that we take for granted that our schools do is not normal outside of our Christian circles. So even just by, pointing out some of those obvious things to us, it's not so obvious to them. So, yeah.
When you say, let's assume that the administrator is using a tool, something like what you just said, even the one-on-one meeting with the family, but they're not couching that discussion in what are the problems you would like solved. They're couching it in what information can I give you. I feel like that is even a walk away from this conversation. Maybe our admins, they've already gotten accepted into 2 other meetings with 2 other leadership development series with Herzog, so perhaps they can't jump into the marketing one the next, or whatever else they're doing. What else would be a takeaway, a tool, a tip you could suggest right now to an unaware administrator? Though I don't really, let's assume the better. Let's assume they're not unaware, but one who's maybe just, like you said, overworked. They're the only guy. They're the only gal. They don't have that help. What would be another tool, another boots on the ground suggestion? What do you think?
Yeah, I would, my first thing was always, I tell people, like, utilize your people. Like, utilize your people. And it doesn't mean like, oh, I have a paid staff, or I've got an admissions person or a marketing person. I didn't have any of this. I never did. Even as we grew, I never added it. Like, we were able to manage without it.
Sure.
And so it's not a necessity. So so it's 2 things. One, going back to utilize your promoters, right? You have these parents that love your school, like, get them to help you. Right? Gather them together, cast the vision, give them a couple of things that they can do, and let them help you. The second thing is that is create a marketing task force. Again, this was an early strategy I employed at our school. I got a small group of volunteers. We met once a month. And we said, all right, what are the goals? Like, what are the activities and events coming up that we need to plan for? Like, what are the things that we want to try to do? We would sort of divide and conquer. A month later, we'd come back. We'd report back, hey, how'd that go? How'd that go? Right? And then again, we'd look at the calendar. What are the next things that we need to do? And this was just a small group of people that I met with every month that helped me get stuff done. And they don't have to be marketing people. Like, in fact, I often tell people you don't necessarily want the parent with the marketing degree on your task force, because they come out of the corporate world and their ideas for what they think you should do don't work in small Christian schools, right? Like,
there you go.
What works for Coca-Cola doesn't work for the Rock School.
They have a budget line item that says marketing. They do.
They have a massive budget line.
They have a brand too. Yeah.
They have a brand. And largely what they spend their money on is brand awareness. They put a million commercials on TV, right? Ford Motor Company spends millions of dollars so that one day when I'm going, I think I need to go buy a new car, I think maybe I should think about a Ford. Maybe I'll look at the Ford dealership, right? We can't do that as Christian schools, right? We can't saturate the market with our message so much so that one day people go, I'm thinking about switching schools. Oh, I remember this other one, right? We have to do lead generation. Like, we have to do things that create conversions, not just brand awareness, right? So the corporate strategies often don't work. So sometimes having those people on your team, your marketing task force, is actually not helpful. In the same way that sometimes having marketing people on your board can be a challenge as well. So
but if Coke and Ford are listening, though, I mean, we're happy to take your money too.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, but yeah, this task force, you just need worker bees, right? You just need reliable people who can get stuff done. You don't need marketing people.
Okay.
So that's the big thing, is that you utilize the people. Get your promoters going, build a volunteer or marketing task force. Doesn't hit your budget hard and can really produce good results.
Well, we have a series as part of what we do that's looking ahead 1 month at a time. Is what's the Christian school principal? What should they be doing in the month upcoming? What should they do in the March, our principal series timeline? I'm adding to it now. Make sure you're meeting with your marketing task force each month, and maybe you're looking at your summer advertising at this time, and so on and so forth. That should definitely be part of it.
Well, I was going to say, just kind of before we move on from the marketing task force, could you give some examples of like what would be good calls to action, I guess, for that team? Like, are you as we're developing, like, here are the different events that are coming up? I think that's kind of the obvious thing, but are there specific items that you try to include with that task force of, like, here's what we need to accomplish before next month?
Yeah. So we use them for content writing for our website, blog posts, social media posts, right? So they were content creators. We use them in whatever way we could to leverage access to local churches. So if there were certain churches that we were trying to make inroads into, like, who goes to that church? Who knows the pastor? Like, because as a head of school, if I write an email or call a pastor that I don't know, it's very easy for him to say no, right? When it's the parishioner that sits on the front row and has been a part of the church for 22 years, when they go and ask, is a little harder for the, right? So figure out who's the right person to ask.
Yeah.
Can we put up signs? Can we put a booth? Can we have a booth in your foyer, right? So some of those kinds of things. Obviously community of, having presence at community events.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did at our school was what we called an informal open house, which was like a weekly walk-in, kind of like the way realtors do, where they put a sign out like, walk in and see the house anytime between 8 and 12. We would do that once a week. And so we would staff that with volunteers who would just be there in case a family dropped in, greet them, give them some information, take them on a little tour, schedule them to come back and meet with the head of school at a later date. So those are just, again, some of the ways that we were utilizing that volunteer task force.
Cool.
Now, Jim, you say that you have been with Herzog now doing 20 plus of the Herzog Foundation Leadership Series marketing workshops.
Yep.
So give us the hard sell on those now. Why should our listeners make sure they get to a marketing workshop as part of the Leadership Development Series there at the Herzog Foundation, wherever they are, whether Grand Rapids or Washington, D.C. or wherever it is? What else are they going to hear besides the nuggets you've already given away?
Yeah, I really think there's 3 real value points for attending one of the marketing enrollment training retreats. I think one is you're going to get a big picture. So I think one of the things that we really, what I've discovered is, like, when we say marketing, most Christian school leaders have this very narrow idea of what marketing is, and they kind of think of it as like advertising. It's like, it's where I spend my money. But marketing is much broader. So the first thing you're going to get a holistic, sort of big picture concept of what it is when we say marketing and enrollment strategies. The second thing is you're going to get proven strategies, right? You're going to get stuff that actually works, not just like one time, but like work that we've seen replicated in every region of the U.S. and Canada, rural schools, urban schools, suburban schools, small schools, large schools. So many of the people who come to a marketing and training retreat, they leave, and 3 months later, 6 months later, we're getting an email. Oh my gosh, I made all these changes. I did all these things you said. And wow, look at the results at our school. And so one of the things I really appreciate about the Herzog Foundation is they bring in the best of both. So they bring in heads of school like me who are practitioners who have walked in your shoes, right? And so I have some credibility because, like, I did it, right? So there's some trustworthy. Sure. But they also bring in industry experts, right? Like they bring in people who specialize in Christian school marketing, and that's what they do for a living. And so they're really experienced and really well versed in those things. And so it's a marriage of the two things. You're getting like this industry expert, but you're getting it in the context of like, hey, here's what it looks like in practice in a Christian school. And that's the great thing that's what's changed. And when I started on this journey 15 plus years ago, there were no agencies specializing in Christian schools. There was no Herzog Foundation. There were no podcasts. Like, I had to go to corporate America and like learn it, and then I had to figure out what it looked like in my unique school. Today, so much of that today is largely what we do in the Herzog trainings. Like, we're translating best practices in marketing into the unique context of a Christian school. So you're getting proven strategies at work. And then the third thing is there's value in the networking that takes place, right? So when you come to a training, there's 50, 60, 70 other Christian school leaders that are there. So you're not just learning from me and like a handful of coaches. You literally have an opportunity to learn from 50, 60, 70 other people for 2.5 days, because we all have something to share and we all have something to learn from one another. And so you get 2.5 days of building relationships and learning from other people. And it's just wonderful. This is what I always tell people at the beginning and end of our training retreats. Like, my deep hope for you is that you're encouraged and equipped. Right? At the end of the 2.5 days, you leave encouraged and equipped. Encouraged with the motivation, like, I can do this, and then equipped with, yes, I know how to go back and do it. And I think by and large, the testimonies suggest that we're hitting that mark most of the time.
Well, I mean, if we're going to talk about equipped, we've been talking for what, 20 minutes? I've already written down so many things, and then you're talking about 2.5 days. Like this is, yeah, I don't have enough paper, so I think that is definitely for sure what you're going to receive from
Gotcha.
that kind of training. So
Now, Jim, at this point, we move in our conversation to a spotlight administrator. So it's a Christian administrator spotlight, and I'm looking at right now at the leadership of the administration, the school leadership at the Rock School, a foundation for flourishing down in Gainesville, and I see Miss Erica Heiss is the head of school.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know her?
I do. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, Erica Heisey was
Heisey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Erica Heisey, she served with me for 20 years. So
Wow.
she was the principal that served under me as head of school. And she at one time she kind of handled admissions, and so when I decided to step away, I really went to the church leadership and said, hey, you can do an external search if you want, but you've got your perfect candidate right there. And so,
right there.
So she was promoted to head of school at my departure, and so there's been a real continuity of leadership in the school. So this is the school's 32nd year, and she's only the third head of school.
wow,
So
that's awesome.
I followed the founder, and then she followed me. So, so she's really done an exceptional job.
That's a blessing. Hey, we make it a point to pray for these Christian school administrators that we spotlight. So, Matt, do you want to pray for
Let's
Ms.
do it.
Heisey right now?
let's pray for Erica. Father, thank you so much for all of our Christian school leaders, but specifically Erica, and taking on this role. And I thank you for Jim's leadership and helping her and assisting her. And I just pray now that as she continues on the task of leading a Christian school and being a light in that community, I pray that you would give her the support that she needs. You give her wisdom as she guides both the students and the staff there. Lord, we thank you for your goodness and your faithfulness to us. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Jim,
All right.
thanks for coming on.
Thank you
Man,
so much. Awesome.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I can't
Thanks for the
wait to
invite.
get out to one of these meetings and to meet you, but also then to actually just learn more. Matt,
Yeah. Let's keep learning.
let's keep
Yeah.
learning.
We got a lot to learn.
Let's do it. All right, everybody, thanks for growing with us today.
Before you go, please be sure to hit that follow button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, on Spotify, be sure to tap the star icon near the top and select the number of stars you'd like to give us. We'd be so grateful for 5. On Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the ratings and review section and then tap write a review to share your thoughts of the podcast. Thank you.